Part 3, Chapter 1. Sergey Ivanovitch Koznishev wanted a rest from mental work, and instead of going abroad as he usually did, he came towards the end of May to stay in the country with his brother. In his judgment, the best sort of life was country life. He had come now to enjoy such a life at his brother's. Konstantin Levin was very glad to have him, especially as he did not expect his brother Nikolay that summer. But in spite of his affection and respect for Sergey Ivanovitch, Konstantin Levin was uncomfortable with his brother in the country, and it positively annoyed him to see his brother's attitude to the country. To Konstantin Levin, the country was the background of life. That is, of pleasures, endeavors, labor. To Sergey Ivanovitch, the country meant, on one hand, rest from work, on the other, a valuable antidote to the corrupt influences of town, which he took with satisfaction and a sense of its utility. To Konstantin Levin, the country was good, first because it afforded a field for labor, of the usefulness of which there could be no doubt. To Sergey Ivanovitch, the country was particularly good, because there it was possible and fitting to do nothing. Moreover, Sergey Ivanovitch's attitude to the peasants rather irritated Konstantin. Sergey Ivanovitch used to say that he knew and liked the peasantry, and he often talked to the peasants, which he knew how to do without affectation or condescension, and from every such conversation he would deduce general conclusions in favor of the peasantry and in confirmation of his knowing them. Konstantin Levin did not like such attitude to the peasants. To Konstantin, the peasant was simply the chief partner in their common labor, and in spite of all the respect and love, almost like that of kinship, he had for the peasant, sucked in probably, as he said himself, with the milk of his peasant nurse, still as a fellow worker with him, while sometimes enthusiastic over the vigor, gentleness, and justice of these men, he was very often, with their common labors called for other qualities, exasperated with the peasant for his carelessness, lack of method, drunkenness, and lying. If he had been asked whether he liked or didn't like the peasants, Konstantin Levin would have been absolutely at a loss what to reply. He liked and did not like the peasants, just as he liked and did not like men in general. Of course, being a good-hearted man, he liked men rather than disliked them, and so too with the peasants. But like or dislike the people as something apart, he could not only because he lived with the people, and all his interests were bound up with theirs, but also because he regarded himself as a part of the people, did not see any special qualities or failings distinguishing himself and the people, and could not contrast himself with them. Moreover, he had lived so long in the closest relations with the peasants, as farmer and arbiter, and what was more, as adviser. The peasants trusted him, and for 30 miles round they would come to ask his advice. He had no definite views of the people, and would have been as much at a loss to answer the question whether he knew the people as the question whether he liked them. For him to say he knew the peasantry would have been the same as to say he knew men. He was continually watching and getting to know people of all sorts, and among them peasants, whom he regarded as good and interesting people, and he was continually observing new points in them, altering his former views of them, and forming new ones. With Sergey Ivanovitch, it was quite the contrary. Just as he liked and praised a country life in comparison with the life he did not like, so too he liked the peasantry in contradistinction to the class of men he did not like, and so too he knew the peasantry as something distinct from and opposed to men generally. In his methodical brain there were distinctly formulated certain aspects of peasant life, deduced partly from that life itself, but chiefly from contrast with other modes of life. He never changed his opinion of the peasantry and his sympathetic attitude towards them. In the discussions that arose between the brothers on their views of the peasantry, Sergey Ivanovitch always got the better of his brother, precisely because Sergey Ivanovitch had definite ideas about the peasant, his character, his qualities, and his taste. Konstantin Levin had no definite and unalterable idea on the subject, and so in their arguments Konstantin was readily convicted of contradicting himself. In Sergey Ivanovitch's eyes, his younger brother was a capital fellow, with his heart in the right place, as he expressed it in French, but with a mind which, though fairly quick, was too much influenced by the impressions of the moment, and consequently filled with contradictions. With all the condescension of an elder brother, he sometimes explained to him the true import of things, but he derived little satisfaction from arguing with him, because he got the better of him too easily. Konstantin Levin regarded his brother as a man of immense intellect and culture, as generous in the highest sense of the word, and possessed of a special faculty for working for the public good. But in the depths of his heart, the older he became, and the more intimately he knew his brother, the more and more frequently the thought struck him that this faculty of working for the public good, of which he felt himself utterly devoid, was possibly not so much a quality as a lack of something. Not a lack of good, honest, noble desires and tastes, but a lack of vital force, of what is called heart, of that impulse which drives a man to choose someone out of the innumerable paths of life and to care only for that one. The better he knew his brother, the more he noticed that Sergey Ivanovitch and many other people who worked for the public welfare were not led by an impulse of the heart to care for the public good, but reasoned from intellectual considerations that it was a right thing to take an interest in public affairs, and consequently took interest in them. Levin was confirmed in this generalization by observing that his brother did not take questions affecting the public welfare or the question of the immortality of the soul a bit more to heart than he did a chess problem, or the ingenious construction of a new machine. Besides this, Konstantin Levin was not at ease with his brother, because in summer in the country Levin was continually busy with work on the land, and the long summer day wasn't long enough for him to get through all he had to do, while Sergey Ivanovitch was taking a holiday. But though he was taking a holiday now, he was doing no writing. He was so used to intellectual activity that he liked to put into concise and eloquent shape the ideas that occurred to him, and liked to have someone to listen to him. His most usual and natural listener was his brother. And so, in spite of the friendliness and directness of their relations, Konstantin felt an awkwardness in leaving him alone. Sergey Ivanovitch liked to stretch himself on the grass in the sun, and to lie so, basking and chatting lazily. "You wouldn't believe," he would say to his brother, "what a pleasure this rural laziness is to me. Not an idea in one's brain, as empty as a drum." But Konstantin Levin found it dull sitting and listening to him, especially when he knew that while he was away, they would be carting dung onto the fields not plowed ready for it, and heaping it all up anyhow, and would not screw the shares in the plows, but would let them come off, and then say that the new plows were a silly invention, and there was nothing like the old plow, and so on. "Come, you've done enough trudging about in the heat," Sergey Ivanovitch would say to him. "No, I must run just around to the counting-house for a minute," Levin would answer, and he would run off to the fields. Chapter 2. Early in June it happened that Agafea Mikhailovna, the old nurse and housekeeper, in carrying to the cellar a jar of mushrooms she had just pickled, slipped, fell, and sprained her wrist. The district doctor, a talkative young medical student who had just finished his studies, came to see her. He examined the wrist, said it was not broken, was delighted at a chance of talking to the celebrated Sergey Ivanovitch, and to show his advanced views of things, told him all the scandal of the district, complaining of the poor state into which the district council had fallen. Sergey Ivanovitch listened attentively, asked him questions, and, roused by a new listener, he talked fluently, uttered a few keen and weighty observations, respectfully appreciated by the young doctor, and was soon in the eager frame of mind his brother knew so well, which always, with him, followed a brilliant and eager conversation. After the departure of the doctor, he wanted to go with a fishing rod to the river. Sergey Ivanovitch was fond of angling, and was, it seemed, proud of being able to care for such a stupid occupation. Konstantin Levin, whose presence was needed in the ploughland and meadows, had to come to take his brother in the trap. It was that time of year, the turning point of summer, when the crops of the present year are certainty, when one begins to think of the sowing for the next year, and the mowing is at hand, when the rye is all in ear, though its ears are still light, not yet full, and it waves its gray-green billows in the wind, when the green oats, with tufts of yellow grass scattered here and there among it, droop regularly over the late-sown fields, when the early buckwheat is already out and hiding the ground, when the fallow lands, trodden hard as stone by the cattle, are half plowed over, with paths left untouched by the plow, when from the dry dung-heaps carted onto the fields there comes at sunset a smell of manure mixed with meadow-sweet, and on the low-lying lands the riverside meadows are a thick sea of grass waiting for the mowing, with blackened heaps of the stalks of sorrel among it. It was the time where there comes a brief pause in the toil of the fields before the beginning of the labors of harvest, every year recurring, every year straining every nerve of the peasants. The crop was a splendid one, and bright, hot summer days had set in with short, dewy nights. The brothers had to drive through the woods to reach the meadows. Sergey Ivanovitch was all the while admiring the beauty of the woods, which were a tangled mass of leaves, pointing out to his brother, now an old lime tree on the point of flowering, dark on the shady side, and brightly spotted with yellow stipples, now the young shoots of this year's saplings bright with emerald. Konstantin Levin did not like talking and hearing about the beauty of nature. Words for him took away the beauty of what he saw. He assented to what his brother said, but he could not help beginning to think of other things. When they came out of the woods, all his attention was engrossed by the view of the fallow land on the upland, in part yellow with grass, in parts trampled and checkered with furrows, in parts dotted with ridges of dung, and in parts even plowed. A string of carts was moving across it. Levin counted the carts, and was pleased that all that were wanted had been brought, and at the sight of the meadows his thoughts passed to the mowing. He always felt something special moving him to the quick at the haymaking. On reaching the meadow, Levin stopped the horse. The morning dew was still lying on the thick undergrowth of the grass, and that he might not get his feet wet, Sergey Ivanovitch asked his brother to drive him into the trap up to the willow tree from which the cart was caught. Sorry as Konstantin Levin was to crush down his mowing grass, he drove him into the meadow. The high grass softly turned about the wheels and the horse's legs, leaving its seeds clinging to the wet axles and spokes of the wheels. His brother seated himself under a bush, arranging his tackle, while Levin led the horse away, fastened him up, and walked into the vast gray-green sea of grass, unstirred by the wind. The silky grass with its ripe seeds came almost to his waist in the dampest spots. Crossing the meadow, Konstantin Levin came out onto the road and met an old man with a swollen eye, carrying a skep on his shoulder. "What? Taken a stray swarm, Ivanovitch?" he asked. "No, indeed, Konstantin Dmitritch. All we can do is keep our own. This is the second swarm that has flown away. Luckily the lads caught them. They were plowing your field. They unyoked the horses and galloped after them." "Well, what do you say, Ivanovitch? Start moving or wait a bit?" "Well, our way is to wait till St. Peter's Day, but you always mow sooner. Well, to be sure, please God, the hay's good. There'll be plenty for the beasts." "What do you think about the weather?" "That's in God's hands. Maybe it'll be fine." Levin went up to his brother. Sergey Ivanovitch had caught nothing, but he was not bored and seemed in the most cheerful frame of mind. Levin saw that, stimulated by his conversation with the doctor, he wanted to talk. Levin, on the other hand, would have liked to get home as soon as possible to give orders about getting together the mowers for the next day, and to set at rest his doubts about the mowing, which greatly absorbed him. "Well, let's be going," he said. "Why be in such a hurry? Let's stay a little." "But how wet you are!" "Even though one catches nothing, it's nice. That's the best thing about every part of sport, that one has to do with nature. How exquisite this steely water is," said Sergey Ivanovitch. "These riverside banks always remind me of the riddle. Do you know it? The grass says to the water, 'We quiver and we quiver.'" "I don't know the riddle," answered Levin wearily. Chapter 3. "Do you know, I've been thinking about you," said Sergey Ivanovitch. "It's beyond everything what's being done in the district, according to what this doctor tells me. He's a very intelligent fellow. And as I've told you before, I'll tell you again, it's not right for you not to go to the meetings, and altogether to keep out of the district business. If decent people won't go into it, of course it's not to get better. We pay the money, and it all goes in salaries, and there are no schools, nor district nurses, nor midwives, nor drugstores. Nothing." "Well, I did try, you know," Levin said slowly and unwillingly. "I can't, and so there's no help for it." "But why can't you?" "I must own that I can't make it out. Indifference? Incapacity? I won't admit, surely, it's not simply laziness." "None of those things. I've tried, and I see I can do nothing," said Levin. He had hardly grasped what his brother was saying. Looking towards the ploughland across the river, he made out something black, but he could not distinguish whether it was a horse or the bailiff on horseback. "Why is it you can do nothing? You made an attempt and didn't succeed, as you think, and you give in. How can you have so little self-respect?" "Self-respect," said Levin, stung to the quick by his brother's words. "I don't understand. If they told me at college that other people understood the integral calculus and I didn't, then pride would have come in. But in this case, one wants first to be convinced that one has certain qualifications for this sort of business, and especially that all this business is of importance." "What? Do you mean to say it's not of importance?" said Sergey Ivanovitch, stung to the quick too at his brother's considering anything of no importance that interested him, and still more at his obviously paying little attention to what he was saying. "I don't think it's important. It does not take hold of me. I can't help it," answered Levin, making out that what he saw was the bailiff, and the bailiff seemed to be letting the peasants go off the plowed land. They were turning the plow over. Can they have finished plowing? He wondered. "Come, really though," said the elder brother, with a frown on his handsome, clever face. "There's a limit to everything. It's very well to be original and genuine, and to dislike everything conventional. I know all about that. But really, what you're saying either has no meaning or it has a very wrong meaning. How can you think it a matter of no importance whether the peasant, whom you love, as you assert—" "I never did assert it," thought Konstantin Levin, "dies without help. The ignorant peasant women starve the children, and the people stagnate in darkness and are helpless in the hands of every village clerk, while you have at your disposal a means of helping them and don't help them because to your mind it's of no importance." And Sergey Ivanovitch put before him the alternative. Either you are so underdeveloped that you can't see all that you can do, or you won't sacrifice your ease, your vanity, or whatever it is, to do it. Konstantin Levin felt that there was no course open to him but to submit, or to confess a lack of zeal for the public good. And this mortified him and hurt his feelings. "It's both," he said resolutely. "I don't see that it was possible." "What? Was it impossible, if the money were properly laid out, to provide medical aid?" "Impossible, as it seems to me. For the 3,000 square miles of our district, what with our thaws and the storms and the work in the fields, I don't see how it is possible to provide medical aid all over. And besides, I don't believe in medicine." Oh, well, that's unfair. I can quote to you thousands of instances. But the schools, anyway." "Why have schools?" "What do you mean? Can there be two opinions to the advantage of education? If it's a good thing for you, it's a good thing for everyone." Konstantin Levin felt himself morally pinned against a wall, and so he got hot and unconsciously blurted out the chief cause of his indifference to public business. "Perhaps it may all be very good, but why should I worry myself about establishing dispensaries when I shall never make use of them, in schools to which I shall never send my children, to which even the peasants don't want to send their children, and to which I've no very firm faith that they ought to send them," said he. Sergey Ivanovitch was for a minute surprised at this unexpected view of the subject, but he promptly made a new plan of attack. He was silent for a while, drew out a hook, threw it again, and turned to his brother, smiling. "Come now. In the first place, the dispensary is needed. We ourselves sent for the district doctor for Agafea Mikhailovna." "Oh, well, but I fancy her wrist will never be straight again." "That remains to be proven. The peasant who can read and write is a workman of more use and value to you." "No, you can ask anyone you like," Konstantin Levin answered with decision. "The man that can read and write is much inferior as a workman, and mending the high roads is an impossibility. As soon as they put up bridges, they're stolen." "Still, that's not the point," said Sergey Ivanovitch, frowning. He disliked contradiction, and still more arguments that were continually skipping from one thing to another, introducing new and disconnected points, so that there was no knowing to which to reply. Do you admit that education is a benefit for the people? Yes, I admit it, said Levin without thinking, and he was conscious immediately that he had said what he did not think. He felt that if he admitted that, it would be proved that he had been talking meaningless rubbish. How it would be proved he could not tell, but he knew that this would inevitably be logically proved to him, and he awaited the proofs. The argument turned out to be far simpler than he had expected. If you admit it is a benefit, said Sergey Ivanovitch, then, as an honest man, you cannot help caring about it and sympathizing with the movement, and so wishing to work for it. But I still do not admit this movement to be just, said Konstantin Levin, reddening a little. What? But you said just now. That's to say, I don't admit its being either good or possible. That you can't tell without making the trial. Well, supposing that's so, said Levin, though he did not suppose so at all. Supposing that is so, still I don't see, all the same, what I'm to worry myself about it for. How so? No, since we are talking, explain it to me from the philosophical point of view, said Levin. I can't see where philosophy comes in, said Sergey Ivanovitch in a tone Levin fancied as though he did not admit his brother's right to talk about philosophy, and that irritated Levin. I'll tell you then, he said with heat. I imagine the mainspring of all our actions is, after all, self-interest. Now, in the local institutions, I, as a nobleman, see nothing that could conduce to my prosperity, and the roads are not better and could not be better. My horses carry me well enough over bad ones. Doctors and dispensaries are of no use to me. An arbiter of disputes is of no use to me. I never appeal to him and never shall appeal to him. The schools are no good to me, but positively harmful, as I told you. For me, the district institutions simply mean the liability to pay 4 halfpenny for every 3 acres, and drive into the town, sleep with bugs, and listen to all sorts of idiocy and loathsomeness. And self-interest offers me no inducement. Excuse me, Sergey Ivanovitch interposed with a smile. Self-interest did not induce us to work for the emancipation of the serfs, but we did work for it. No, Konstantin Levin broke in with still greater heat. The emancipation of the serfs was a different matter. There self-interest did come in. One longed to throw off that yoke that crushed us, all decent people among us. But to be a town councillor and discuss how many dustmen are needed and how many chimneys should be constructed in the town in which I don't live, to serve on a jury and try a peasant who's stolen a flitch of bacon, and listen for 6 hours at a stretch to all sorts of jabber from the counsel for the defense and the prosecution, and the president cross-examining my old half-witted Ilyushka. Do you admit, prisoner in the dock, the fact of the removal of the bacon? Huh? Konstantin Levin had warmed to his subject and began mimicking the president and the half-witted Ilyushka. It seemed to him that it was all to the point. But Sergey Ivanovitch shrugged his shoulders. Well, what do you mean to say then? I simply mean to say that those rights that touch me, my interest, I shall always defend to the best of my ability. That when they made raids on us students, and the police read our letters, I was ready to defend those rights to the utmost, to defend my rights to education and freedom. I can understand compulsory military service, which affects my children, my brothers, and myself. I am ready to deliberate on what concerns me. But deliberating on how to spend 40,000 rubles of district council money, or judging the half-witted Ilyushka, I don't understand and I can't do it." Konstantin Levin spoke as though the floodgates of his speech had burst open. Sergey Ivanovitch smiled. "But tomorrow it'll be your turn to be tried. Would it have suited your taste better to be tried in the old criminal tribunal?" "I'm not going to be tried. I shan't murder anybody, and I've no need of it. Well, I tell you what," he went on, flying off again to a subject quite beside the point. "Our district, self-government, and all the rest of it, it's like the birch branches we stick in the ground on Trinity Day, for instance. They look like a copse which has grown up of itself in Europe, and I can't gush over these birch branches, and I believe in them." Sergey Ivanovitch merely shrugged his shoulders, as though to express his wonder how the birch branches had come into their argument at that point, though he did really understand at once what his brother meant. "Excuse me, but you know one really can't argue in that way," he observed. But Konstantin Levin wanted to justify himself for the failing, of which he was conscious, of lack of zeal for the public welfare, and he went on. "I imagine," he said, "that no sort of activity is likely to be lasting if it's not founded on self-interest. That's a universal principle, a philosophical principle," he said, repeating the word philosophical with determination, as though wishing to show that he had as much right as anyone else to talk of philosophy. Sergey Ivanovitch smiled. He too has a philosophy of his own at the service of his natural tendencies, he thought. "Come, you'd better let philosophy alone," he said. "The chief problem of the philosophy of all ages consists just in finding the indispensable connection which exists between individuals and social interest. But that's not to the point. What is to the point is a correction I must make in your comparison. The birches are not simply stuck in, but some are sown and some are planted, and one must deal carefully with them. It's only those people that have an intuitive sense of what's of importance and significance in their institutions, and know how to value them, that have a future before them. It's only those peoples that one can truly call historical." And Sergey Ivanovitch carried the subject into the regions of philosophical history, where Konstantin Levin could not follow him, and showed him all the incorrectness of his view. "As for your dislike of it, excuse my saying so, that's simply our Russian sloth and old serf owners' ways, and I'm convinced that in you it's a temporary error and will pass." Konstantin was silent. He felt himself vanquished on all sides, but he felt at the same time that what he wanted to say was unintelligible to his brother. Only he could not make up his mind whether it was unintelligible because he was not capable of expressing his meaning clearly, or because his brother would not or could not understand him. But he did not pursue the speculation, and without replying, he fell to musing on a quite different and personal matter.